Thanks for joining us. This is Omni View, episode 128, Balanced News Perspectives. Today is July 30th, 2026. Today's stories from around the world, multiple viewpoints, your call. American public opposition to the Iran conflict is now clear in fresh polling, narrowing the room for sustained U.S. military action. A new AP UNOSC poll shows that most Americans believe the war in Iran has not been worth fighting. The results also indicate that public goals for the conflict differ from those stated by President Trump. The survey captures views across party lines at a moment when U.S. involvement continues. Respondents were asked directly about the value of the military effort and about the specific objectives they consider most important. The poll was conducted by the Associated Press in partnership with NORARC at the University of Chicago. The poll comes from a joint project of the Associated Press and NORARC at the University of Chicago, which has tracked opinion on foreign engagements for years. Administration supporters argue that the poll reflects short-term fatigue rather than a full assessment of strategic aims such as preventing Iranian nuclear advances. Critics of continued involvement, including some members of Congress from both parties, point to the same numbers as evidence that the costs in lives and resources have already exceeded any achievable gains. The factual baseline is undisputed. The survey sampled U.S. adults and found majority opposition to ongoing operations. The split centers on whether that opposition should alter operational decisions or simply register public sentiment. White House statements have continued to emphasize the importance of the mission even as the poll numbers circulated. One position holds that presidents retain constitutional authority to direct military operations even when polls show public doubt, because elected leaders must weigh long-term security interests that surveys cannot fully capture. Supporters of this view note that past presidents continued engagements after similar readings. The competing position maintains that sustained public opposition eventually constrains funding and troop commitments through congressional action, and that ignoring clear polling risks repeating earlier episodes in which domestic support eroded mid-conflict. Each side concedes that polls measure sentiment at one moment and do not dictate every tactical choice. What happens next? Congressional committees begin work on the next defense appropriations bill in the coming weeks. Shifting now to a strike reported in Kuwait. Kuwait's military reported that an Iranian strike struck a building belonging to a Chinese firm in northern Kuwait on Thursday morning. One worker was killed in the attack. The incident occurred amid ongoing regional tensions. Kuwaiti officials confirmed the nationality of the company and the single fatality. No other casualties were reported in the initial statement. Kuwaiti authorities described the strike as a direct hit on civilian infrastructure tied to a foreign company. Iranian officials have framed such actions as responses to prior U.S. and allied pressure in the region. Chinese state media have noted the nationality of the firm without assigning blame. The shared facts are the location, the reported casualties, and the attribution to an Iranian strike. Interpretations differ on whether the target was chosen for its Chinese connection or its location near strategic sites. Kuwait has maintained diplomatic channels with multiple parties while investigating the event. What happens next? Kuwaiti and Chinese officials are expected to issue further statements on the investigation and any diplomatic steps. Next, China's Communist Party has set the date for an October meeting. China's Communist Party announced it will hold a conclave in October focused on internal governance. The meeting will address party discipline and organizational matters. The announcement was issued through official channels and specifies the timing and main theme. No further agenda items were released at the time of the statement. State media present the gathering as a routine step in strengthening party structures ahead of future policy cycles. Outside observers note that such meetings have historically preceded adjustments in economic or security priorities. The factual announcement is limited to the date and topic. Differing views concern whether the session signals continuity or upcoming personnel shifts. Past plenums have varied in their public emphasis on discipline versus policy direction. What happens next? Further details on the agenda are expected in the coming weeks from official party channels. Meanwhile, protests over jobs continue in India. Protests have continued in India over limited job opportunities for recent university graduates. Reports link the demonstrations to a mismatch between the number of degree holders and available positions matching their qualifications. Demonstrations have taken place in several cities and involve students and recent graduates. The scale of the protests reflects the size of the annual graduating cohort. Government statements emphasize ongoing efforts to expand vocational training and private sector hiring. Student groups and labor organizations argue that exam-based selection systems and slow public sector recruitment have left many qualified candidates without work. The underlying data show rising numbers of graduates alongside persistent vacancies in certain sectors. The disagreement centers on whether reforms should focus on expanding formal jobs or changing the structure of higher education. University enrollment figures have increased steadily in recent years, while formal employment growth has lagged in some fields. What happens next? State governments are scheduled to review recruitment processes in the next quarter. In trade developments, Vietnam and the United States have agreed to increase cooperation targeting illegal transshipment and trade fraud. The arrangement focuses on customs verification and supply chain monitoring. Officials from both countries signed the cooperation framework in recent days. The agreement includes provisions for sharing shipment data and conducting joint reviews. U.S. trade officials describe the step as a way to ensure compliance with existing agreements and protect domestic industries. Vietnamese authorities framed the partnership as support for legitimate exporters while addressing enforcement gaps. Both sides accept that certain goods have been rerouted to evade tariffs. The difference lies in how quickly new verification systems can be implemented without disrupting normal commerce. Trade volume between the two countries has grown substantially in recent years. Now, some progress worth knowing about. Vietnam and the United States have begun coordinated customs checks and information sharing aimed at stopping illegal transshipment. The initiative includes joint training for border officials and new documentation requirements for certain shipments. One early target is goods suspected of avoiding tariffs through false origin claims. The main complication remains the volume of legitimate trade that must continue to move without added delays. Implementation will occur at selected ports and border points first. Now, to really understand this story, there's something most coverage leaves out. Most coverage treats poll numbers on wars as simple popularity ratings. Yet the path from survey to decision runs through congressional funding votes, military planning cycles, and White House calculations about re-election coalitions. When a poll such as the AP NORC survey records majority opposition, it first registers with members of Congress who control annual defense appropriations. Those members then weigh whether to attach conditions or limits in the next spending bill. Historical cases show that sustained polling weakness has sometimes prompted presidents to accelerate negotiations or reduce troop levels, even while publicly defending the mission. Knowing this sequence lets readers distinguish between a poll that merely records sentiment and one that is already shaping budget hearings or diplomatic timelines. The concrete check is to watch whether the next defense appropriations markup includes new reporting requirements or spending caps tied to the conflict in question. If you want to go deeper on the poll results, compare how AP News and Reuters are covering today's lead story. Tomorrow, watch for further statements from Kuwaiti and Chinese officials on the investigation into the strike. That's Omni View. As always, compare outlets, look for primary documents, and separate what's known from what's assumed. The world is complicated, but it's not beyond understanding, and you just spent a few minutes understanding it better. If that's worth something to you, subscribe wherever you listen. See you tomorrow. And if you'd rather watch than listen, find us on YouTube at Nara Network. Links in the show notes. And before you go, this show is part of the Nara Network, a family of daily podcasts on tech, science, and markets, each one a short, sharp briefing you can finish on the commute. If today earned its place in your feed, here's your next listen. Fascinating Frontiers. the most fascinating news from space and science. Find every show free at neranetwork.com. And on the website, every episode's visuals live in our free image gallery at neranetwork.com/gallery. Royalty free under Creative Commons. Download with attribution. This episode used AI voice synthesis of my voice. Editorial selection and analysis are my own.